entire globe involving hundreds of different cultures explaining the same phenomenon by different names.
The nature of the footprints, namely their remarkable consistency, their biomechanical appropriateness, those aspects that are extremely compelling.
Hey everybody, it's Tim and Dana.
How you guys doing?
And we are here at the Salt Fork State Park, and we're so excited to have John Hickenbottom with us. John, why don't you tell everybody about who you are?
Yeah, so I'm the naturalist here at Salt Fork. It's the biggest park in the state. And we're getting excited for the Ohio Bigfoot Conference. So that's why I'm here talking to these guys.
That's why we're here.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And so, I mean, Salt Fork is probably one of the, would you say it's the hottest spot for Bigfoots in the state of Ohio?
I think you could pretty safely consider Salt Fork to be the more or less the capital of, the Bigfoot capital of Ohio.
Right. And also I've heard that Ohio, just in general, probably has the most Bigfoot sightings east of the Mississippi.
Yeah. And if you think about it, we're like the right mix we're the right mix of like population versus wildland. You know what I mean? People are out a lot. It's, even though we have huge parks and huge green spaces, people are out in them. Right. So if you think about places in the Smokies, there are probably more, people don't see every bear that's out in the Smokies, but you know what I mean?
It's more rugged.
Yeah, so it's more rugged, so people aren't out. But here, people are out. People are out here all year long.
And there's a ton of waterway. I mean, there's a ton of water.
In especially Eastern Ohio. When you get into Eastern Ohio, I mean, just right here, this lake is dammed. This is not a natural lake.
Right.
But just outside the park is Wills Creek, which is a really large tributary of the Muskingum.
Right.
We've got the Muskingum River, Tuscaroras River to our north. Yeah, so it's a really lots and lots of waterways.
And water's important.
Water's very important.
Especially for a large omnivore.
Water, food, and shelter. So you mentioned that this was dammed. Can you kind of give like a brief history of how Salt Fork came about?
So initially the park was going to, but initially it wasn't a park. Initially the lake was going to be a county reservoir. And the state sort of looked at it. We're talking like late 50s. Okay. So the state kind of looked at it and said, "Wow, this is they dammed it. It turned into this really big lake." So they started buying up properties. They bought up over 200 farms, smallhold farms that were in the area, and they just kind of kept buying farms and buying land, and eventually became the biggest part. I mean, we're close to 20,000 acres of public land.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy because just like if you rent a cabin here, which we're under today. We're under one of our cabins because it's raining in Ohio. But you literally, when you arrive at Salt Fork, you arrive in the main entrance and you're like, yay, we're here. But it's still another 20 minutes to your cabin. So it's okay.
That's basically everyone that visits. That's the first thing. If they've never been here before, that's the first thing anybody says. Not the scenery or anything. It's this place is big.
It's
really big.
Yeah. It's huge. Yeah. And especially when you're driving from Delaware and you've been on the road for 7 or 8 hours. You're like, I got to go to the bathroom. You're like, yay, we're here. And then you're like, where is it?
We're used to it now, though.
Right.
Yeah.
So how long have you been here at the park?
Okay.
And what do you do?
Yeah. So I'll start with what I do. So I'm the naturalist here at Salt Fork, which I handle all the education and a lot of the biological survey stuff and things like that. So I deal with plants and animals, and also deal with the public, take them on nature hikes and things like that. I do things like this,
cool.
since especially here at Salt Fork with Bigfoot, being kind of top of our list here,
right?
As far as wildlife goes, and then little things like that, plant and animal surveys. It's a pretty good job.
And how long have you been here?
So I started with ODNR in 2012. I worked
because
here,
what is ODNR?
Ohio Department of Natural Resources.
Okay, just so everybody knows who's not from Ohio.
So I'm a naturalist with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources Division of Parks and Watercraft is my full title. Yeah.
Cool.
So I started here in 2012 as a seasonal naturalist, and that's basically Memorial Day through Labor Day.
Okay.
A little after Labor Day. and I worked 2 seasons and then transferred to another park. If you've ever been another relatively squatchy park and really rugged and pretty remote, Lake Hope State Park down in southern Ohio.
Wow.
Okay, we're gonna have to check that out.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, Lake Hope's very rugged
Okay.
and not nearly as busy as Salt Fork.
Okay. Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was down there for a couple of years and then transferred back up here as a full-time naturalist in 2016. So I've been working year-round full-time here since 2016.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So that's a while. I mean, that's enough time for you to get, hear some crazy stories or have some crazy experiences.
So, and I also grew up here.
Oh, okay.
This was so I worked out here in high school.
Okay.
I literally grew up right here in the park. I'm from about 12 miles that away.
Okay, cool.
Might still be in the park.
Yeah,
just kidding.
Seriously.
So, well, I guess 12 miles from the entrance that direction.
Okay. Yeah.
So can you tell? I mean, were you interested in the subject of Bigfoot even before you started working here?
So this is kind of where. All right.
Let's hear your story.
All right. So so growing up here, there were always stories about Bigfoot and people would, you know what I mean? But when you're like local and people, it's like with anything, when people see things, it's like, can you believe, you know what I mean? Can you really believe that he saw that? What he was squirrel hunting and he saw, you know what I mean? Do you really think that? I've been out all my life and I've never seen it. You know what I mean? Like you get a lot of that. So I guess, I mean, as a kid, I was interested in it. You kind of go through a phase, you know what I mean?
We all like weird stuff.
Yeah.
Where you get
interested in it.
Right.
And then I kind of let it go. And then I went to college. I got that dose of like college, education and skepticism. You know what I mean? Like, so,
we know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
Our youngest son is he's going into his junior year and he's studying biology as well. And before, when he was younger, he was like all into Bigfoot. Now he's like, but he's coming this weekend.
Oh, cool. Oh, that's awesome.
So you can meet
I'd love
him.
to chat with him.
Yeah,
that'd be great.
Yep.
So so I got out of college. I went through a couple. I worked for other organizations and things right after college, and then kind of fast forward to working here.
Let me pause you. So did you go to college for this type?
I did. I went to natural resources.
Okay.
Awesome.
And my background's in reptiles and amphibians.
Okay,
I'm a
cool.
snake guy. So that's actually I'm supposed to take some folks on a salamander hike while they're here for the conference, and I don't know if that's
hopefully it's warm enough.
Hopefully it gets warm. But so my background's in that. So kind of fast forward, I did a couple of other jobs elsewhere in the state. I've tried to mostly stay in the hill country. I like it over here. Once you get west of Columbus, it's flat and there's nothing but soybeans. And,
that's how it is where we live.
Yeah, so I like unglaciated, little slice of Appalachia right
it's
here.
Cool. It's super
really
cool.
So I start here, and that was 2012. I guess Finding Bigfoot would have came out here in 2011.
Okay.
That's when the episode, I believe, that kind of sparked a lot of interest.
Well, that, and actually, so just so the folks know, MonsterQuest, Mr. Doug Hajicek, we're actually sitting right where they filmed the Ohio Grassman. Between this location and the cabin next to us is where they shot up the drone.
That's cool.
And everything.
Yeah.
So we're on location, Doug.
So the right, the MonsterQuest and the episode of Finding Bigfoot and USA Today came out with a pretty nice article.
Oh, okay. Cool.
About it too. So that was it was really a kind of a fever pitch at that point when I got back here. But being like fresh out of college and everything, I'm like, like I wanted to tell people about all the cool birds and snakes and stuff. And then I was having like dads and cargo shorts coming up. Have you ever seen Bigfoot? And that was like and that was like the only thing that anybody ever wanted to talk about. But it was never a good discussion about it. You know what I mean? It was always like this sort of joke. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'm like, so I did for a couple of years. I didn't really bother with the Bigfoot thing. You know what I mean? And I was very dismissive of it. And I know it's hard to like change your opinion now in like 2023. You know what I mean? I'm just thankful I didn't do like a Twitter post bashing Bigfoot at this point or something, so somebody could look up, you know what I mean? No, So I kind of let it go. Like I said, I transferred to another park for a little while. Really unwillingly transferred too. Like I did it to follow full-time work.
Okay.
Which is kind of the nature of this. If anybody out there wants to get involved with parks, whether it's national parks or state parks, you got to move where the work is. So I was seasonal here. I went to another park to go full-time.
Okay.
And came back here. And when I came back here, the naturalist that had kind of filled in the interim, or not filled in, I mean, the naturalist that worked here in the interim, she had kind of farmed out the Bigfoot thing. I had done 2 one-off hikes that were during the day, and it was sort of a trick to get people out in the woods.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It wasn't so much, wasn't real heavy on the research. I didn't even really talk to any researchers about it. I just did two one-off programs in the middle of the day in the summer.
What was the name? What'd you call it?
I think I just called it the Bigfoot hike. I called it
cool.
self-work Bigfoot hike.
That makes it easy and simple.
And it was like in July. I think I did it right in the middle of July in 2012, 2013. So, and it was fine. It was well attended, but there were one-off things. I didn't, so the naturalist between my times here had kind of farmed it out to other researchers. They sort of put on researchers as volunteers. And she sort of stepped back, So when I got back here in 2016, I'm like, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Absolutely.
I don't want to deal with, that was the kind of my thinking is like, I don't want to deal with Bigfoot,
Like
I got important things.
Yeah, I'm like, I got other stuff to do.
I got birds and stuff
right,
to catalog, right?
So, so for a couple of summers, we would do the Bigfoot hike series, which they took place at night. And my role in it at the time was sort of to facilitate, you know what I mean, keep everybody safe, make sure nobody broke their ankle on the trail, you know what I mean?
Right, because if it's completely dark.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and then I would call some owls and things like that. So
I call my owl in our backyard.
Oh, yeah?
We have
that's awesome.
a barred owl.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah.
Oh, that's really good.
I don't want to blow out your mic. We can, maybe at the end I'll do. I speak fluent now.
Okay, I want to hear all about it later.
Yeah, but we so I would call some owls and talk about nighttime, animals and noises and how nature does weird things that we don't think about, and sometimes that could be construed as maybe something supernatural. If you're not familiar,
especially like a fox in heat.
Right.
Yeah.
Or bobcats make some. We have a ton of bobcats here.
You
so
do?
Yeah.
How cool.
Yeah, we have a lot of bobcats.
How about bears? Are there any bears?
There
here?
are.
Okay.
Chances of seeing, we're nowhere near needing bear-proof dumpsters or anything.
Okay.
So your chances of seeing one are it's never zero.
It's
but
almost.
It's pretty slim.
It's probably the same as seeing a Sasquatch.
Probably. And that's actually a pretty good. That's actually a pretty good analog for an that you think about it, their caloric intake's probably pretty similar. You know what I mean? Like how many calories they have to take in. Most likely their shelter and requirements are pretty similar, but I don't know if you can see. It's really thick out here. Yeah. I mean, there could be a black bear across the lake right now. There
could be a Sasquatch.
There could be a woolly mammoth for that matter.
I mean, seriously.
And we can it's very thick out here.
It is extremely thick. Yep.
So yeah, your chances of seeing a bear here are pretty slim.
Go ahead. Now I'll come back to that question. I'll let you finish.
So when because that's the thing about that question, about how I got started.
Yeah.
I have to kind of give the backstory to get where I'm going with it. So in 2018, by 2018, I'd gotten to know the researchers who were doing the program pretty well, and there were cracks starting to form in my. Not even my skepticism, because having a science background, you're supposed to remain skeptical. You're not supposed to be cynical. You know what I mean? That's kind of the drawback is that skepticism sometimes turns into cynicism about it. You know what I mean? And that's where you were talking about your son, not, that's because college professors get very, cynical about it.
Right.
So there were cracks in my cynicism and my skepticism. I was my overly skeptical mind was starting to kind of wane, you know what I mean, as far as that goes. And then by 2018, it was fall 2018, I had the closest thing that I could consider an experience. At least it's something that I can't explain off the top of my head. And this is kind of funny. So I was still dating my now wife, and I'd taken her squirrel hunting. in the wildlife area, because
like hunting with like a gun.
Yeah,
squirrel hunting? Oh, okay.
So she's from Canton, which is a city up north up here. And when I would go visit her while we were dating, we'd go out and see live music. We'd go, do things like that. And when she would come down here,
you guys met in college.
No.
Oh,
She
okay.
actually she was running down here. She was jogging down here one day, and I met her. And that's
in Salt Fork.
Yeah.
In Salt Fork.
Yeah.
Okay, and wait, so you guys went squirrel hunting here in Salt Fork?
So in the wildlife area.
Oh, okay, because you're allowed to go hunting.
Yeah,
there.
it's public. We got
I want to get back
5,000 acres.
to how he tracked his wife down.
Oh,
did he come and say, "Hey, I work here at the park"?
That's
That's what I would have done.
If it works, but when she would come down here, because this is Appalachia, I'd take her squirrel hunting, because that's how you date in Appalachia. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'm like that. I grew up squirrel hunting and things like that. And we own a farm. We do a lot of like subsistence hunting.
Do you eat them? Or because I love like the idea of wildlife. I don't hunt, but like anybody who's deer meat, or like I love to cook.
They're great.
Okay, cool.
And they're sustainable.
Okay,
that's the thing. They're a rodent, so they breed and breed and breed.
Yep. So you're helping.
So you're not really taking much. You'd really have to try a long campaign to make a dent in the squirrel population.
Right.
So I'm all about sustainable harvest.
Yep,
too.
me too.
We don't harvest for antlers. If it's within range is all that matters, and it's what I mean.
Right.
We don't harvest for antlers. It's only meat. I try to raise my kids like that because
good. That's awesome.
And it's unfortunate because a lot of hunting shows have kind of geared things to I've got daughters. I've got 3 daughters. And I'm, when you watch those hunting shows, it's like, no, hon, that's not how people dress when they hunt. That's how people dress when they hunt on camera.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
If I catch you wearing leggings during deer season, like,
Like this is not what Dana looks like when I'm in the cabin. The only reason I look like this is because we're doing it on film.
So so we still hunt and things like that. And we eat a lot of wild game.
Cool. I love that.
And we could go into a whole, like, to me, it's an ethical question. Like we're part of a process that now you go to the grocery store, you're completely removed from that process, whether it's gardening, harvesting your meat, anything like that. We're removed from a process that for our entire history we were part of. So that's a relatively new situation that mankind's in, where we're completely removed from our
and it's also, in my opinion, more humane to eat a deer that's been living its whole life in the woods and not like crammed in some little cage in a and
that's, we raise a lot of meat too. We raise we raise meat chickens, and fresh air and sunshine,
oh my gosh,
does a world of good
and they're just happy.
So like I said, I could really get on a soapbox about like,
but let's
so we do a lot of that. So we were out squirrel hunting here on the wildlife area. This was probably mid-October. And we hear coming from over the next ridge this long, mournful howl.
Okay.
Long, like you can feel it in your chest,
Okay.
Long,
yeah.
A minute?
Yeah.
40 seconds.
Yeah, we're talking like 20 seconds,
right.
Long,
something that would have a big lung capacity.
Grows and peaks, you know what I mean?
Right.
And she looks at me and she says, "What was that?" I'm like, I really don't, we're quiet. I'm like, I really don't know. Not a coyote. You know what I mean?
Right,
it's not
right.
And I'm, like I said, I'm pretty good with animal noises.
Well, that's your profession.
It's not.
Right.
So, spooks us a little bit. And we make our way back to the car. And we're in the car, and she's YouTubing while I'm driving home. And she's YouTubing animal sounds,
Right.
And I said, "Hey, look up the Ohio howl," And she plays it, and she's like, "Oh, that's what it was. That's what we heard."
So let's share what the Ohio howl is.
Yeah. So, well, she asked me. Yeah. She's like, "What is that?" And I said, "Oh, allegedly it's a Bigfoot, and it's a recording that now it's generically known as an Ohio howl. You can hear Ohio. People have heard Ohio howls all over, but it was first recorded here in Columbiana County." And what was it, 94, 97, 94? Yeah.
I'm not sure. Don't quote us on date. But Matt Moneymaker.
Yeah, Matt Moneymaker in Columbiana County. Which is actually not terribly far. We're 2 counties away from Columbiana County. It's kind of northeast of here, along the river. So she looked at me and she said, "Well, what was that?" And I said, "Well, it's allegedly a Bigfoot."
Right.
I'm like, I've got no explanation as to what we
what
heard.
Else it could
I
be.
said, so, what we heard. Now we also have, and this is just me being skeptical, and me also knowing how not to say overfished, but how well researched Salt Fork is, like how many people are out all the time. I mean, just last week we had 2 research groups at the same time out here.
Okay.
I've got no way of knowing that there wasn't somebody on the next ridge with a Bluetooth speaker playing the exact video that, the exact sound clip that she looked up trying to elicit a response. I have no way of knowing that wasn't the case.
I wonder if a Bluetooth speaker would have that kind of capability to like make you feel it in your chest.
Yeah,
though.
I don't know.
That's an interesting detail of your experience.
Yeah. So we heard that, and that stuck with me. You know what I mean? That was enough to where, like, the next time I hung out with the researchers, I was like, yeah. So,
So was this during the day or nighttime?
This was during the day.
Yeah.
So we're talking, let's see, it's mid-October. It was before dark, but squirrel hunting's always good in the couple hours before sunset.
Right.
So we were probably out, 4:35, something like that.
Okay.
And so, right before it was starting to get lower light, but it wasn't dark by any means. So we, I had that experience, and that kind of got to me a little bit. Like I said, the next time I hung out with the researchers, I was like, yeah, so got some news. Like,
I'm not so skeptical anymore.
Yeah. So I started really doing, I'm trying to think of so the first book that I picked up that I actually read through was Ken Gerhard's The Bigfoot, it's the Bigfoot Casebook. That's Lyle Blackburn.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I know what you're talking about.
That was the first one, I picked it up on Amazon or whatever, and first one that I actually read through, and I'm like, oh man, some of this stuff seems really plausible. And then the more I started really listening to people who had experiences here at the park, and this was another thing that sort of started to melt my icy cynicism about it, was like, I started to talk to people, of course, I mean, you folks talk to a lot of people, and you go to the conferences, and the demographics that come to conferences, huge variety in what you get. You always talk to people who are kind of boring, and the Bigfoot thing makes them more interesting. So they might elaborate, you know what I mean?
Right.
A little more. And then you talk to folks who, I mean, I hate to say it, but clearly had some sort of maybe psychotic episode. You know what I mean? Like where you get this out, but then you talk to people who have no skin in the game.
Exactly.
Who no reason whatsoever, and such an improbable sounding story, you know what I mean? That it's like, why on earth would you make this up? You know
we even have some people that we talk to with their witness experience who don't want to be on the podcast.
Right, yeah, exactly.
They just don't want it to be known that they've had an experience. They don't want people to think they're crazy.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that really blow me away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. We can actually circle back to that, because I've got a good story and it was one of the first stories that I heard that raised the hairs on the back of my neck.
Yeah, let's hear the story.
Okay.
Actually, I think you need to squinch in a little bit. You're off. We got to get you closer. It's cold out here.
So I was working here at the park, and I've got a map down at the nature center that I let people put pins in if they've had it. It's just a map of Ohio.
Oh,
that
okay.
If,
people put Bigfoot
if they've had
if
they've had an experience, they can stick their pin in
that's
it.
so cool.
It's all of Ohio too, and it's interesting to me with a natural resources background that a majority, even if they're not from Eastern Ohio, a majority of the sightings are all from this eastern part of the state.
Right.
The really heavily wooded, and braided with waterways.
Right.
Part of the state. Not a whole lot in the farm country out west. You
right.
know. So I've got that. I've got a lot of Bigfoot stuff down at the nature center, and I had a couple, probably in their early 40s, and the wife was doing this sort of like, no, go tell him, just tell him, I'm like, he'll listen, go tell him, and finally the guy kind of came up, and he was like, and she's like, he's got a story, and I'm like, oh yeah, sure, shoot, and I'll listen. That's another thing, is I'll basically listen to anyone that, and I'll never ever like turn my nose up at it. No matter how outlandish. A lot of people just want to be listened to.
Right. Yep.
Even if you're making it up, they just want to be listened to.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
I agree with
you. But I'll listen to pretty much anybody, and chat with them about it. Like, oh, that's interesting. Even if in my head I'm thinking like, this seems like a weird, a weird thing. I don't know that. Anyway. So this guy begins to tell me. He says he was in he lived in southern Ohio, and I didn't get like permission to give incredible details, but like in south central Ohio, you get into areas like the big state forest down there called Shawnee State Forest, and those counties down there are all counties that, you know, they're still really depressed. They never really bounced back from the when the mines pulled out. You know what I mean?
Right.
A lot of it's coal country down there. It's the heart of coal country. I mean, really that part of it. So basically here, you're more in West Virginia than Ohio as far as environment goes.
Yeah, and it feels like that.
Yeah, down there you're more in Kentucky than Ohio.
Right.
Like when you get, you know, to those parts, and there were even some tobacco farms that far south in the state.
Okay.
So, you know, it's that kind of environment. So the way he put it was he grew up incredibly poor, which is not uncommon for that part of the state. I mean, it's not uncommon here. I lived in a town that had a VFW and then used to have a post office, and then that was gone. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that uncommon here. But the way he put it was he was, you know, grew up incredibly poor, and his dad was given a trailer. They said, you know, if you can move it someplace, you can have it.
Right. So
they moved it to another of his dad's friend's property, you know, and I forget how he put it. It was sometimes we could keep the lights on, sometimes we couldn't. You know what I mean? But he told me he had very distinct memories of his mom rounding up him and his siblings in the living room and like turning off all the lights and saying, "Hey, things outside," you know, and he could hear it rubbing and bumping and scratching around, that just walking around and sometimes it'd be 10 minutes and sometimes it would be an hour, but it would happen, you know, pretty often.
Wow.
So they'd all kind of just hunker down and wait. And, you know, he also has memories of the landowner telling his dad, like, "Hey, don't send the boys out hunting today. That thing's been on the edge of the field watching all the," you know. So he had this thing. And this
what time frame did he say approximately when he? I mean, was this an older gentleman?
And like he was in his early 40s, so this so we're looking probably the 1980s. You know, in southern Ohio. And he says, you know, that thing's on the edge of the field. So he didn't pay any attention to, you know, it was just something that happened. You know, didn't talk about it at school.
Right.
But Bigfoot wasn't part of his thinking. You know, fast forward a few years, he's at a friend's house. And they're watching whatever TBS, and Harry and the Hendersons comes on,
right?
And he tells his friend, he's like, "Oh, that's the thing," and his friend's like,
"Wow."
His friend's like, "What? It's Bigfoot," and he's like, "No, it's the thing. You guys didn't have the thing. Like we had the thing. You know, it was the thing. It was the thing. Like that's the." And his friend's like, it's Bigfoot. It's made up that, you know. And he's like, "No, it's we always just called it the thing. You know."
Right.
And I'm like, wow, you know, and that story, and the fact that his wife had to like
push him,
you know, that kind of has always stuck with me, you know, that particular one. So I get all kinds of stories. And then my skepticism really started to wane a lot. And what I always tell people if they ask me 100% if I believe, first off, I say, I don't like the term believer. There's just not a better term, because like in science doesn't deal with belief. You can believe anything you want. You know what I mean? Science deals in facts, data, you know. So I don't like the term believer. I like the term researcher. And I suppose if you've had something that, you know, like you're a knower, you know what I mean? You know. And
actually I have to tell you, like in talking with Dr. Jeff Meldrum, that's exactly, you know, there was, I guess like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I was at like a cabin with him and we were at a party and I was talking to him on the porch and asked him the same question. So do you really believe in Bigfoot? And he said, you know, belief comes from when you don't have evidence.
It's faith. That's what the belief is, a measure of faith,
but
you know.
He's like, there's something that's making these footprints.
Right.
And to me, that's evidence.
Yeah.
So,
and that's kind of where I'm at.
Something's out there making these footprints.
Right. And what I always tell people when they really press me about it, I'm like, have you seen the X-Files? You know, the poster in Mulder's office.
Yes.
Right? I want to believe.
Right.
Like that's the thing is I want, you know, I want so bad, and for a bunch of different reasons. Like it's so, first off, I'm a critter guy. Like how cool would it be if there was some, you know, if there's
in your backyard.
Yeah. Right. You know. Second, like if there's something that's remained hidden that long, it means that we haven't ruined everything we've touched.
Which is
you know what I mean?
So awesome.
Yeah, which like that's why this is worthwhile.
Especially something as big
right.
as a Sasquatch.
That's why that's why research is worthwhile. Like the Bigfoot research is worthwhile. You know what I mean? Like I said, it's not just me tricking people to come outside with the Bigfoot. It's not that. Like this stuff is worthwhile because if it exists, that means we haven't ruined everything.
Exactly,
you know what I mean?
Exactly. And it's usually the bigger things in nature that tend to fall first.
Yeah. And I mean, if you should check out at the lodge while you're here. There are some pictures of what the park looked like before the park was established.
Right.
This was all cleared. This is all second growth forest.
Wow.
Erosion. You know what I mean? This is all cleared for farmland.
Yeah.
And not growing thing. I mean, this was pasture land. I mean, the topsoil was like 4 inches deep here. You know what I mean? They weren't growing a lot. This was all pasture land.
Yeah, a lot of these trees, they seem like really gigantic, but they're new.
They're newer, as far as in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. Actually, we were walking once with Mark DeWorth back here, and he found like a really big old tree that must have been when it was a farmland.
They're definitely pre-park trees, and you can usually tell them because their branches start about 12 feet off the ground as opposed to 60 feet up the up the trunk, because when they were there they were out in the middle of a field not competing with anything. So yeah, and I love that aspect of this stuff, is that forensic look at the forest. You can like read the landscape and kind of see what happened here. So yeah, anyway, that's why this is worth it. And then if we move on to like 2020, where something kind of weird happened,
because this is your experience. Tell us about it.
So I've gotten way more. I drank the flavor aid, so to speak, by 2020. You know what I mean? I've gotten much more into the whole Bigfoot subculture. I mean, I guess we're going to have thousands of people here at the conference. I don't know if you can call it a subculture when there's that many. You know what I mean? It's kind of mainstream now. You got
all these people from all over the place coming to Ohio. You're like, what?
Right. So it's not really a fringe thing anymore. I don't think when you can, but I did a series of videos, the series of YouTube videos when we were doing virtual programming here. We weren't doing in-person programming.
Through the state.
Through the state, yeah. We did a series of videos about Bigfoot, and I think they're still the most viewed videos on the ODNR's YouTube channel, which also kind of says something. You know what I mean? Like, it says something that interest is there,
right?
And people take it seriously enough. You know what I mean?
So how can people see this video? They go to the ODNR website.
Now, if you go to YouTube and just type in like Saltfork Bigfoot, it'll be one of the first ones that pop up.
All right, cool. We want to make sure our viewers
make
see
sure
that.
Make sure you see the dude with the mustache, and that's the those are the right ones. So I did those, and one of them I wanted to do kind of a live streaming Bigfoot, like kind of a finding Bigfoot thing, where I was out in the recording. So I went to our group camp, which had been vacant since October 2019 because of COVID. You know what I mean? Like, no, we hadn't had it open, and I set up, and I don't really have I don't have a ton of. I'm not very tech savvy. First of all, I'm a field person,
right?
So I'm trying to keep my batteries charged on everything, and I figured I'd edit it together later. So I had a little campfire, and I'm like, I'm going to record a little bit and just kind of vamp. I'll just kind of talk for a while, and if I need filler at some point, I can use So I'm talking, and I get this tree knock, and I mean, it really sounded like somebody just hit a home run. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And it sounded like it was right in the woods, right next to where I was set.
Yikes.
So I freeze, and I'm like, man. And I got it on film. You can hear this pop, and even my iPad picked it up. Like, you can hear this loud, and I'm just sort of staring off into the woods, Now the tree knock thing, I don't know about it. You know what I mean? I've always been kind of when we talk about it, I'm like, I think if anything, it's a manufactured sound. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that they're picking up pieces of wood and smacking them against trees. I think it's if they're popping their, popping their lips or something. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's a manufactured sound. If that's, I don't think personally that they're actively finding. So, because this is the problem, and I'll do this on hikes. I'll say, now try to find a stick that's not going to bust apart when you whack a tree. You know what I mean?
That's interesting.
Like, just go try to find a rotten log. You know what I mean? Or a log lying on the ground that not only you can pick up and wield easy, but that's not going to blow apart, when you hit it. Right. It's hard. It's hard out in the woods to just find you're not going to find a perfect piece of ash. You know what I mean?
Right.
That sounds like a Louisville slugger when you hit it against a tree. Most of them are going to blow apart. And I kind of doubt that they're carrying around their tree knocking stick everywhere they go. You know what I mean? So I think it's if again, this is all, if this is a thing and it's not just, like an auditory glitch that we're here. You know what I mean? Like I think it's a manufactured sound.
And that's an interesting take, because I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that before.
Yeah.
But it makes a lot of sense.
It just like, there are certain things that have always stuck with me that on the flip side of the Bigfoot stuff, where I'm like, it's when they talk about like, oh, maybe their hair is like filled with fluid and that's why they kind of can blur in and out. And I'm like, well, there would have to be a precedence for that. You know what I mean? There's got to be that's evolution works in a way that we would have to sort of have evidence that, so it's probably not, like, it could be. There's a chance it's never zero.
Right, you know right. Because until we find one,
it's never zero. But to me, I like using things that we already have a precedence for.
Right.
And there's tons and tons of I am making a manufactured sound right now.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, so.
Yep.
Some sort of vocalization. That's what So I'm sitting there and I just cannot, like, and it sounded like every recording of a tree knock.
Right.
So
there's nobody here.
There's no one here. Yeah. And I was also very secretive about what I was doing. Like the park manager knew,
right?
Because and the lieutenant for law enforcement knew, but I didn't want anybody coming in and like, screwing with
messing
me.
with
yeah,
you. Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So it does happen. It does happen. It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
And I always lecture people about that. Like, don't, you're damaging legitimate research.
Mm-hmm.
If you're,
it might seem fun and cute, but it's real research.
Yeah, it is real research. So later that night, I'm kind of getting ready to get some shut eye, and I hear all this shuffling around in the leaves across from where I'm camping at. So I'm creeping up to it, and I'm expecting a deer, a raccoon or something, and I've got like my finger on the button of my headlamp, and I get up there, and the shuffling stops.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, all right. And I'm just getting ready to turn my headlamp on, and I hear the same exact sound. I mean, the same tone, say about 40 yards behind me. And I turn around, and as soon as I turn around, whatever I was creeping up on takes off into the bushes. You know what I mean? So I'm texting a friend of mine, a researcher who has helped me out a lot here at the park. I'm texting him. I'm like, man, I got a second tree knock. Which, I mean, barring any other terminology that we haven't, I said I got a second tree knock. And then I told him the whole situation. I said, I turned around and then whatever I was creeping up on ran off. And he was like, oh yeah, they were trying to distract you. And I'm like, oh, can you not? Like, I'm going to stay out here by myself. You know what I mean? That's because he also, at one point, he's like, all right, I'm hitting the hay. Hey, keep an ear out for campsite walkers. And I'm like, can you call it something other, like something not as creepy? Like camps.
Like The Walking Dead.
Yeah,
and
I'm
stuff.
like, why are you calling it something so creepy? Like, I got to sleep out here.
Did you see the big hairy friends?
Right, yeah,
I'm
right.
Like, what's Harry and the Hendersons guy, right?
Right. Yeah. He's like, oh yeah, keep an ear out for campsite walkers. And I'm like, well, that's creepy. Like, now I'm thanks for putting that in my head.
I think people forget, we all laugh about Bigfoot and think he's cute and fun, but like if this thing really exists,
it's an animal
and it's gigantic, and it could rip your head off,
right?
And nobody would know.
No, right?
And that's the scary thing. I couldn't sleep last night, and I was up in the living room of the cabin. Tim's sleeping away, and it's like midnight, and I'm like just on my iPad watching, and we had like the blinds open, and I'm thinking, what if this thing came up? If it's 10 feet tall, it could totally look in the window. I mean, what would I do?
Yeah, right.
Would I run toward it? Would I run to go get my iPhone? No, I would run and scream, Sam, help!
I always say that.
You peed yourself.
I always say that because everybody's like, oh, well, if you see Bigfoot, take a good picture of it. And I'm like, I'm not going to be able to take a good picture. You know what I mean? Like, don't look I can barely take a picture with my phone as it is. You know what I mean? Like I'm not going to be the one that takes a good picture of Bigfoot,
Right. I think
I'm not going to be with it enough.
Forget that it's not a joke.
Right.
It's like if it's a serious, living being out there.
Yeah.
It's scary.
And on that note,
right.
I always kind of point out, like, I think people always say, well, what if you would get found? And I'm like, 3 years it would be big news.
Right.
For 3 years people would be research.
Right.
Let's say 4, because there would be mammalogy students who did their whole thesis on that. You know what I mean?
Right.
But like 4 years of hard research. But if you look 4 or 5 years ahead of, like, let's say today, one gets hit by a 18-wheeler, 100% Bigfoot exists. It's news everywhere. I'd imagine the conference would be awesome. If that, you know what I mean? If that
was here.
Yeah, but
John will get a raise.
If you talk right, if you talk to a kindergartner in 5 years, Bigfoot would be another animal.
Yep.
Because think about the improbability of a giraffe, right?
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, this thing with a neck that's 2 stories tall. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it's a creature from fantasy. You know what I mean?
Right.
Every kindergartner knows what a giraffe is, and they're not like, unless that's their favorite animal. You know, I've got kids, and kids have always, unless they don't care that much about giraffe, you know what I mean?
And if you look at them, you forget how fascinating they are.
Yeah, they are, especially when they're fighting each other and they're swinging their necks at each other.
But think about like the improbability of a giraffe, and everyone knows giraffes, you know, they exist. So Bigfoot would become that, where everybody, and of course there would be the, you know, North American Bigfoot Foundation, where you could donate money to protect habitat and stuff like that. You know, of course, all of those things would happen. Like the lumber industry would probably be impacted. Right. You know, all those things would happen, but it wouldn't be, you know, it would not be the end all thing. You know, that would just become another part of our. And we're good at good at coping with that.
We are very good with coping.
We're good at coping with that.
I think we all learned that through COVID. How good we are with coping. You know. So here's a question for you, Don. So, like, if somebody has like a Bigfoot experience here at the, and I say experience because it could be auditory, visual. It could be
I've never had
finding a footprint.
Right.
So do they come to you? Or,
a lot of times.
Are you the person? Like, so if they go to the park ranger, then they would. I mean, because you're not a park ranger,
I'm not a naturalist, but so now I kind of am the person. It's kind of a joke now that I'm like the ODNR's X-Files.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because this is.
You're like the Fox Mulder of ODNR. Okay.
So stuff from other places now come here. You know what I mean? Like I hear things from other places now because they're like, well, Hickenbottom deals with it.
Oh, you know what I mean? Other parts.
Yeah.
So they get reports and call you.
Yeah. So people will, they'll find my, you know, they'll tell people to look me up. Right. You know what I mean?
Right. So then do you go and investigate these?
Sometimes I will. Okay. Yeah. Especially here. I mean, I just went and checked one out in the campgrounds, you know, in a alleged trackway in the campgrounds just last week.
So someone said they saw. Did you see it?
I did. I think it was probably people. It looked a lot like people to me.
Okay.
Like it didn't look like anybody was faking it per se. It just looked like it was. But you know, that's just me. I'm not bashing.
And a lot of things can happen to the material that you're stepping in.
Oh yeah.
When it's cold, when it's raining,
it expands.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, tracking is a whole science in itself. You know, like I'm always skeptical when someone's like, "Oh, I'm an expert tracker," and I'm like, you know, I've hunted my whole life, and I've had deer just vaporize. You know what I mean? Not like run off and I couldn't find them. I mean, it was like I'd shoot and they would vanish. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, and I'm pretty darn good.
I think
at finding
Bigfoot grab.
Right. we had a good story about that. A guy told a story about him hunting out here when he was a kid in the early '80s. And they shot a deer, and he and his dad tracked it. And when they got to it, there's this, you know, thing bending over, picked it up, walked off through the woods. You know, he had claimed it as his own.
There's quite a few of those
out
there. Yeah, that's wild.
Which, man, I don't know. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's another thing. I'm always like, man, think of the number of roadkill deer. Like, why would you waste calories chasing down a deer who is literally built to run?
Right.
You know, when you could just walk along the road in the middle of the night, grabbing, you know what I mean?
Well, I think all large omnivores, whether it's a bear or us or you know, coyotes, and even wolves, they will scavenge as well. They will scavenge
because it's you know, there's an economy out in nature. You never want to spend the calories chasing something that it's going to give you. You know what I mean?
And if you're that big, you know, supposedly, you know, 800 to 1,000 pounds, even a bear, you don't, you know, you need a lot of calories.
Right. Yeah.
So real quick, John, because you know we're running out of time. Can you give us like really like some really quick little encounters that have been reported to you around? And you need to squish in a little bit more because
I keep
come over next to me, Tim.
I keep inching over.
John, I did put deodorant on, and I showered the other day.
So so there's a pretty famous one, a former park officer here. Back in this would have been the 80s. The 80s were kind of a hot time for Bigfoot here at Salt Fork. That's kind of when Don Keating was doing a lot of his research in the area and stuff.
Right.
But a former park officer allegedly had one look in at the ranger station. You know, that's a pretty like
the ranger station that's in the front of the park. Or
no, because the like offices move around. So
they move.
The ranger station doesn't exist anymore.
Wasn't this right when they were building the park?
Yeah, it was pretty. Yeah, it was relatively new.
Hmm.
So there was that one. We, like I said, I usually get encounters that are, I've never had anybody come into the nature center with like sticks in their hair going, my God, I just saw a Bigfoot. You know what I mean?
Right. Okay.
Normally it's a couple of, there's some degree of separation between the sighting and when I hear
they got to go
you
home and like have a shot of whiskey
and like cope with it. Yeah. I talked to 2 fishermen. This would have been last summer. Talked to 2 fishermen, older gentlemen. Seemed like good guys. Didn't seem, who had been night fishing out kind of in the southern end of the park, southern end of the lake, and had their stuff set up down on the bank. They were at the base of one of the hills here, and all of a sudden a rock rolls down the hill. So they kind of turn around and they think maybe somebody's walking down the hill, right? Dislodged a rock.
Right. Okay.
Well, then they see one arc up out of the trees into the water, and then they're like, well, hey, they're yelling like, hey, there are people down here, stop,
right.
Then another one gets launched out of the, and they told me some of them were bowling ball sized chunks of sandstone.
When they told you the story, it had just happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So
were they like trying to maybe report kids that were doing that?
No.
Oh, okay.
After they processed it, they kind of came to the conclusion that it was, because that's what they were. That's what they were saying was like once we saw the size of the rocks that were getting lobbed at us, we decided it probably wasn't a person doing it.
So that was here.
Like last summer, yeah.
So would you say then? Obviously, there's a lot of theories on a Sasquatch. Would you say as a naturalist that this is an animal that's more nocturnal?
I would probably say it's an opportunistic. Like a coyote would be a good example of that. I would imagine first off that they're probably migratory.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And they probably follow food sources.
Right.
And exploit seasonal food sources.
Okay.
That would be my guess.
Right.
And I would also say, and there seems to be some evidence of that because sightings in particular, like recurrent sightings in areas seem to be on a cycle. You know what I mean?
A seasonal cycle.
Okay. In some areas, at least in Ohio.
Right.
And yeah, I would say they're probably, because there's a ton of encounters at night, road crossings, things, and like, they're probably primarily nocturnal, but they would probably, because there are lots of sightings during the day. I mean, Patty was Patty was a daytime sighting. Right.
So the Patterson-Gimlin film.
Yeah, so they probably shift based on what food source is available. They're most likely on a breeding cycle too.
Okay,
you know what I mean? They probably, so, think about that. Like that would probably change what time of day you're going to be, out and about.
Can you think of some, like, obviously sources of meat are pretty clear about what they would probably be eating, but what kind of like vegetation do you think that they would be eating?
There's
here in Ohio, and like
there's a ton to eat here.
So like, what can you give us some ideas of things?
Yeah. So first off, here at Salt Fork, we have on old homesteads and stuff that are out in the. There are still old apple orchards.
Oh, really? That's
but
cool.
The apples are small and hard, and
because they're not being like cared for and stuff.
But still, they're out there.
Okay.
You have tons of mass producing trees, and that's massed with a T. So like nuts.
Right.
Hickory nuts, beech nuts, things like that, walnuts.
Yep.
Tons of, and that's real high protein. You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, do you guys have any like berries? Or
yeah. So
like...
there's black raspberries. There's blueberry. There's like gooseberries and stuff.
Right.
Mushrooms
that are growing wild.
This is mushroom season right now.
Right.
So yeah, that are growing wild. We have pawpaw. If you've never had a pawpaw,
why does that sound so familiar?
They're the best thing in the world.
Telling us about it. Shane was telling us about it out.
Right. I don't know if we have pawpaw in Delaware. Probably not.
I don't know. I'd have to look at their range map. Yeah. But they're here.
Okay.
And
what is it? It's a fruit, or
it is a fruit. It's a weird. So the family, it's called the custard apple family, and that's kind of a good example. They're a good name.
Is it a crab apple?
No.
Oh, okay.
It's actually its own thing. It's actually a tropical plant that grows in temperate Appalachia.
Oh, cool.
The rest of the members of that family live in the tropics. It's just that one. The pawpaw lives up here in temperate North America, temperate eastern North America. So yeah, we've got pawpaws. We have persimmons. Right. Lots of fruit-bearing trees, that are natural, that are native fruit-bearing trees. Right. Not to mention things like cattails, are like an excellent starch.
Right. And there's definitely plenty of water.
And then you also have to look at like insect life.
Okay.
When we have the cicada, the cicada emergence, when you have there's nothing that isn't eating cicadas.
Right.
Even squirrels, you can watch squirrels, you learn they're herbivores, right? They eat nuts.
Right.
If there's all these free calories running around, you're eating those.
Right.
You know, and I mean, the last time we had a big cicada emergence, I was learning how to fly fish.
Right.
And every single bluegill that I would catch would be like literally stuffed. You could like open their mouth and see cicadas. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Because that's what they were eating.
Right.
Snakes and everything will eat cicadas. So I mean, cicadas are also very, very tasty. If you've never had one, if you've never had one, they're delicious.
All right, keep in mind.
I'll fry them in a little fat, make them as unhealthy as possible. Yeah,
get some
great.
ketchup.
I mean,
I would eat them.
well, she would.
Well, that's the thing, though. Like Western civilization is kind of the outlier globally. We're the only ones that don't really exploit insects as a protein source.
Right.
You know what I mean? Most other places do. So, and it would make sense. So there's a ton of, insect calories out there. I mean, even bears, when they first emerge in the spring, they're eating a ton of insects.
Right.
You know,
they got to catch up.
Yeah.
So they'll eat anything.
And they're available.
So So we have an environment here at Salt Fork that can support a Sasquatch.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
Right.
I mean, there's, along with the hunting, I do a lot of foraging,
right?
And I mean, it's relatively easy in a place like this to find, a meal. Like it's not that hard to, find a meal. And if you're I would imagine that the calories certainly aren't scarce out there,
right? So this would be a prime location for a 400-pound omnivore.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe not a ton of them, you know what I mean?
Right.
But a small family unit. For sure, could exploit 20,000 acres.
I mean, if you're looking at the park as 20,000 acres, and you're talking about Sasquatches, how many do you think could live here to support a population?
Now see, this is
these are naturalist questions.
They don't have to be a population if they're migrating.
This is a good question. Right? However, I'd hate to answer it because this is getting into where I would really want, because I'm with the natural resources background, I'd really want to run some sort of statistical model through, you know what I mean?
Right,
I'd hate
you
to
have
speculate
to do it
about, we could probably support 2 bears, you know what I mean? 2 adult bears, that we're breeding, and having young, and those young staying around for a while.
So
and a family. So like a family I could see, or like a small group.
So no more than 10.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And that's without doing any sort of computer model or something,
and that would probably be the max 10. So if you're thinking about 10 Sasquatches living on 20,000 acres of land, and the people land ratio here is not
nobody lives here.
Nobody lives here.
Right.
Yeah, and honestly, most folks don't go off the trail. You know what I mean?
Right.
So there's a lot
of going off trail would be important in having a Bigfoot experience. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Well, no, I'm just saying that there are places that people just aren't.
Okay,
you know
gotcha.
Like there are people that people just aren't.
Okay. Well, we'll have to keep that in mind. We were actually thinking about doing a night.
Oh yeah,
I don't know about a night hike.
Do a night hike, but what I mean is if you wanted to hide, there are places where you're not going to be seen by people, until deer season gets here in December. Right. When people are just everywhere, but there are places where people just aren't.
Well, I mean, it's definitely an exciting place to come, and we are running out of time. Did you have any more questions, Tim?
Amazing that we got John here.
Oh my God, we're super excited.
Well, thanks for talking to me.
We're just sad that it's raining and freezing, but we got everything set up so we could do it here under our cabin. But we do really appreciate you, John.
Well, thanks.
We're super excited to seeing you for the rest of the weekend too.
Yeah, so they can, if the folks want to keep up with the park, what should they do?
And how can they keep up with you?
Okay, for sure.
Yeah.
So as far as park stuff goes, if you're interested in coming to the Bigfoot hikes or any of my programs, the ODNR's website, the Ohio Department of Natural, if you just search Salt Fork, there's an option for events calendar, to see what upcoming events there are, or Salt Fork's Facebook page has all that posted. I just posted Maze this week, so all of that stuff gets posted on there. As far as me, if you look up Hickenbottom John on Instagram, you're welcome. I keep it open. I post mostly pictures of critters that I find. I don't post a ton of Bigfoot stuff, but
but I think that's important though, for people to get into the other things that are going out in the woods, because you're probably never going to see a Bigfoot or hear one or see a footprint, but you know, find something that you love to do outdoors.
And it is, that's exactly it. We try to tell people. I love that you said that, because we try, you know, if you go out looking for Bigfoot every time, you're probably going to be disappointed.
It's like trying to get struck by lightning on a perfectly sunny day.
But you know, you've exponentially increased your chances if you're going out every day, you know,
doing
picking
something
mushrooms
else
or bird watching. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Awesome.
So
yeah, look me up on Instagram. I had it for 4 years before I started posting anything, and then I started posting. You know, I just got mostly for the Bigfoot community. I started like, oh yeah, well here's my Instagram, and now that's what I, you know, kind of what I use it for.
Well, I'm going to start following you.
Yeah,
sure. Absolutely.
I mean, I follow you guys on there. Yeah, so that's how you set this up. It was on Instagram.
I tracked. We were already connected, but
because the book's great.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So.
All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, John.
Thank you so much, John, for being here. All right, we'll see you at the next one.
Yep.